So my name is Chad Carson. You can call me Coach Carson if you like. That's the name of my blog. And I'm going to share with you today basically a story of my blog and what's happened over the last, really a story of FinCon, my history of FinCon and what's happened every year, specifically with email and my email list. So that's the story I'm going to tell you today. And thank you for being here in the afternoon. I know we're going to have to keep the energy going the last session, so I really appreciate y'all being here with me. The kind of the breakdown of my talk, the first part I'm going to give you a timeline, just sort of a higher overview of what's happened year by year, both with my email list and with traffic, kind of tell you the what's happened. And then this is very interesting for me as well, because I don't give talks on blogging. This is the only one I've ever done. But it was really fun for me to do some takeaways and think about what have I learned over the last 5 years, I believe, and what's happened and what are some takeaways for me. But I hope you'll also ask me some questions and kind of draw out some other takeaways that we can all learn from. And I'm going to break that down into what I learned during the first part of my blogging career, getting from 0 subscribers to 1,000 subscribers, and then the other part from 1,000 to 12,000. And that brings me to a question for all of you. I'd like to know kind of what our audience is like. How many of you would consider yourself, you haven't started building an email list, you're kind of at 0, and you're ready to get started? All right, so a lot of you. How many of you are in that stage where you've gotten started, but you're less than 1,000? All right, maybe another third. How many of you are over 1,000 with your email list? All right, some of those as well, so you can keep me honest with your information as well. All right, I'm going to start off talking a little bit about me, just so you know who I am. This is my family. My wife, who's here. Where's Carrie? Carrie's in the audience. There she is. My 2 kids, who couldn't be here with us. They're with mom and dad going to school this week. We love to travel. This is, you can see my FinCon shirt in Ecuador. And a year and a half ago, we went in 2017 and 18 for 17 months to Ecuador, lived in Cuenca. My wife's a Spanish teacher. We love foreign languages, Spanish and Latin culture in particular. So we went there and lived there, and our kids went to school, had a great time. And that was a picture from that. While I was in Ecuador, my happy place is on the basketball court, really any sports court. I used to play football in college. We played ultimate frisbee this morning. Any ultimate players with me? Yeah? All right, 1 or 2? 2? All right. When I went to Ecuador, I didn't realize how tall I was until I went to Ecuador. This is when they recruited me to the Ecuadorian NBA. I'm the third guy from the left. I'm also a real estate investor. That's what I blog about and a lot of the meat of my blog and podcast. And this is my first fourplex that I house hacked, and I moved into unit number 2 and live for free. So any house hackers out there? All right, yep. And also have, between a business partner and I, we have 110 units in Clemson, South Carolina, and that's what pays the bills. So the book I wrote a couple years ago, apparently I was surprised when I wrote it. And apparently in Ecuador, I realized I'm not very good at cooking guinea pig. This is a guinea pig that we cooked. It's a delicacy. It's not a pet. It's a delicacy. So that was fun. Really, the theme that goes throughout my blog and my work is doing what matters. I write in the financial independence space, and real estate investing in particular is my niche. But the thing that motivates me, and more of an aspiration than what I'm always doing, but I try to do what matters, try to do what's important to me. And we talk about money, and all of you create content about money. For me, teaching real estate investing, financial independence is about empowering people to do more of what matters and giving to your family, giving to your community, enjoying your life. That's the theme that motivates me. So why email? That's what we're talking about today. And I've thought about this, and if I boil down the entire online business world of creating media and communicating with people, I sort of thought about this like an appliance that you plug in a house. And you've got the electrical outlet, and you've got the appliance. You've got this cord that goes between them, and I kind of think about that with your message and is what you do. Whether you're a podcaster, a blogger, a video producer, you have some kind of message that you want to impact people with. That's why you're here. You're trying to share that message. But then you have this audience, and they give you the power. They give your message the power. If I just talk to my wife all day long, she'd get sick of hearing about me, so I'm talking to a blog and to an audience. And without a plug to plug into your audience, there's no way to communicate with them. So you have that message, you have that audience, and email is just one specific way to communicate with your audience. There are other ways. There's social media, there's screaming from the top of a building, there's all sorts of different ways. Email happens to be, it's an oldie but goodie. I think it's coming back around. I think a lot of people are realizing that you can have 50,000 people on a Facebook list, you can have an Instagram list, you can have a YouTube list, but who controls that communication channel between you and your customer? It changes. Every algorithm change makes that a little bit different. So email, I think, is here to stay, and it's my most important communication channel on a weekly basis, just to promote my blog post. When I want to promote an idea, a YouTube video, if you want to monetize your business, your course, or a product, an affiliate product, email is that communication channel between you and your audience. It's just one form to do it, doing that. And the better your online business gets, the better that relationship with them, with your audience gets. And so that email communication is a critical piece. And so getting a larger list of email subscribers and doing it better is a really important part of your online business. So I want to go through year by year and show you just some stats and then kind of tell you what happened. So I went to Charlotte in 2015. That was my first FinCon. And the stats for me in terms of subscribers and traffic, those are the two things I'm going to track through my talk. I had 951 subscribers, and I'll talk a little bit later about what I did to get those first almost 1,000 subscribers. But when I went to FinCon that year, that's about where I was. In the entire year, I had 51,000 page views. So if you're a brand new beginner to Blogger, that means somebody looked at a page on my site 51,000 times. Could have been one person who looked multiple times, but 51. I clicked probably 1,000 times on my site. That was all of January, right there. And for each of these years, I actually broke it down by January and December. It was really interesting to see that. I had 1,474 page views in January 2015. Post FinCon was September, 24,972 views in December.
Did you start your blog in January 2015, or was that after a year?
No, good question. I did not start my blog. I started it in end of 2013, so I had about a year. And I'll show some of the things I did during that time prior to that in a little bit. But yeah, I had a blog, I was doing some things, but it really took off. So San Diego was 2016. Key stats there. 1,955, so about 1,000 more subscribers in 1 year, and 89,000 page views for the year. I had 7,800 in January, so that December month was kind of a blip. I had a lot of good things going on, which I'll share in a minute, why that was so high. In December was 9,375. So the kind of baseline went up a good bit, about 7 or 8 times on traffic. 2017 was Dallas. Key stats for that year. Almost 6,000 subscribers, so almost 2,000, so it tripled my email list that year. A lot of good things happening. Page views went to 400,000. So what were they before? 89,000. So it was a really big year for me, 2017, going from both the email list and page views. Can y'all see? Let me step back a little bit. 2018 was San Diego, sitting out in the big flamingo. Orlando, I'm sorry. I said San Diego, didn't I? Orlando. Key stats there were 6,389 subscribers. So not a lot more subscribers that year, 586,000 page views. And by the way, if you want all these numbers, at the end I'm going to give you a link where you can download the slides for free. And I don't have an opt-in or anything for bloggers, so you can get it all. And then January, 49,000 page views, 66,000 in December. All right, brings us to 2019, and then we'll start digging into some of the why behind this and what I did. So as of this year, I got these at the end of June. I just want to make it a nice clean 6 months. Was 13,500 subscribers at that point this year, this year, and 619,000 page views. And this has been a big year, and just to give you some context, all of 2018 for me was 586,000 page views. 6 months of 2019 was 619. So it's another big jump this year. It's about 89,000 in January. So that shows you, I'm going to give you a graph and show some of the progression, but it's basically about doubling or more each year. And I think that's realistic. I heard somebody talk about that at some other, at one of the early conferences I heard. And so hopefully some of the things I share with you can help you make that kind of pace as well. So let's talk about some takeaways from what I see as takeaways. And feel free to ask me some questions to kind of dig some of this out as well. So how did I get the first 1,000 subscribers? And I try to focus on the activities that I can do. Some of it's luck, some of it's timing, can be the Google algorithm, but there are a lot of things you can control, and you can set goals based on the things you can control. So for 2009 to 2015, I was actually working in this, my Coach Carson space. I was still a real estate investor, but pretty much pre-FinCon, I was doing things like practicing my craft of teaching. So I live in South Carolina in Clemson, and I'm in the real estate space. We had local groups, little meetups, that would ask local investors who were doing pretty well to come speak. And so my local club would say, Chad, can you come speak about how to find deals or how to get financing for real estate? And I would start doing that and just talking to the local club. I think that's a really important step. If you can find local places or places where it's not intimidating to talk to people and teach what it is you know, you're talking to 10 people or talking to one person is helping you grow your message, is helping you grow that craft so that when you start talking to more people, you actually know what you're talking about. That's an important thing to do. So I taught a lot locally. I did some one-on-one coaching, so this whole thing I'm doing here evolved out of people wanting to take me out to lunch a lot. And I said, I don't really eat that much lunch, I'm on the go. How about we do some coaching, and we did a little mastermind group. And so for several years, I actually didn't have a blog, I didn't have a web page. I was just having little groups getting together, and they paid some money for me to help coach them and consult with them. So again, I was practicing my craft, learning how to teach people, kind of organizing my thoughts around it, adding a lot of value to them, and also making a little bit of money in the process. And I was writing and creating a lot. I've told a couple people here just in conversations, I used to have, this shows you how slow I am probably, but I had a print newsletter that I sent out to like 30 or 40 people who I'd coached with. And I was sending every single month, big envelope, big newsletter, writing like 4 or 5 articles for this newsletter. And I read somewhere that you should send a newsletter. I was sending a print newsletter. Then I went to FinCon and realized you can put that same stuff on a blog, and people will read that, and you don't have to send mail. But again, I was practicing my craft and just getting it done. I was also active in my online niche. And so online, I did start working, and this was, somebody asked what I did those first couple of years to get to 900. I was going to the niche websites within my space. So I'm in real estate investing. Who's the big site in real estate investing? Bigger Pockets. And I'm a fan of Bigger Pockets. I like their mission. I like what they're about. So I just started becoming more involved in Bigger Pockets. They had a forum where members, anybody, can just write blog posts. They call them the member blog posts. Like 20 people look at articles typically. There's not many people looking at each one. I just started posting and posting and posting, started commenting in the forums, started commenting on other articles in the niche. And if we go back to our metaphor of connecting with your audience, I had no audience. I had a very small audience. Bigger Pockets had the audience. The way I can connect with them is adding value to their audience. So I tried to do that by writing on guest posts and commenting, and then eventually that led to them asking me to be, this is my first podcast guest appearance, was on the Bigger Pockets podcast. But that was after probably a year and a half of just me commenting and sharing and doing stuff like that. So how did I actually get people on my email list? Because all that activity doesn't necessarily mean you actually have something productive that people you can communicate with. How do you create your own audience? And so I had 2 primary ways. Again, very simple. When I'm speaking in person, like if I was speaking to you and you were a real estate investing club, or if I would just pass around a clipboard, pen, and a paper. I know it sounds very basic, but I would do that. I would just send it around the room. If you want a copy of the slides, if you want to be on my newsletter, put your name and email, and then I or Carrie would add that into MailChimp somewhere and just upload it. I'd get 100 people in the room, I'd get 50 or 60 people on the list, and keep adding and keep adding. That was my reason for going to speak. I wasn't getting paid to go speak at local places, but in exchange for me coming to speak, I got people on my email list, and that was my form of measuring whether it was successful or not. I also had a website, and this is very embarrassing to do, and I'm gonna blush showing you my website. Here's my form, a little form to download the names. So I went back and looked at the Wayback Machine. You can do this. There's a waybackmachine.com. You can look at your website at any different time. Went back to 2014, and look at me with the suit on and the tie, and it wasn't all bad. I was pretty proud of it at the time. But the thing I did do right, it was having a big, prominent opt-in on the right side of my website and offering something of value. So I've been doing this. I still do this. I have a free toolkit that anybody who shows up on the front page of my site and some other pages of my site as well, I offer this toolkit with a lot of different things that would be helpful to my target audience. So newer real estate investors, intermediate estate investors, I find things that they would find helpful, and I put it in there. And so in exchange for them giving me their email address, I send this to them. So very basic, but you want to have that. There's a lot of, how many people on the front page of their website have an opt-in these days? It's pretty common, but a lot of you don't. So that's something very, very simple. No matter how much traffic you have coming in, there ought to be some kind of opt-in. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to be on there. Otherwise, you're not going to be collecting email addresses. So that was mine in 2014. All right, so doing those two things, again, very basic, sending around a sheet with a sign-up form and going and commenting, writing guest blog posts. That got up to about 950 by the time I got to FinCon. Any questions on this first 1,000? Any ideas? Comments? No? Good? Yeah. How's that tracking it? I used MailChimp when I first started. And so MailChimp is a free for the first 1,000 subscribers, I believe. And so that form would be connected to MailChimp, and then you can track how many you have just by logging in and looking at it.
Do you still use MailChimp?
I don't use MailChimp now. I use ConvertKit. And I'll tell you a couple of reasons why as I get into this next part about some takeaways from going from 1,000 to 12,000. There was some other opt-ins and things I wanted to do that was easier to do with ConvertKit for me. Any other questions on this first 1,000? All right. So from 1,000 to 12,000, some of the takeaways were I focused very much on just generating traffic. So even if you have your opt-in on your front page, it could be good or it could be bad, but you have to have traffic coming in. Otherwise, you can't get people to subscribe to your email list. And so the primary ways that I generated traffic early on to get from 1,000 to 12,000 were guest posts, being a guest on a podcast, somebody else's podcast, and just focusing on creating the best content you can. That's going to mean different things for different people. My style on my website is very how-to. I definitely put a lot of stories in there, but it's very practical. There's a lot of numbers. If I'm talking about house hacking, I'm trying to show diagrams, and here's how you do it, and here's a picture. So just think about your audience and how could I best teach them and trying to do the best content you can. And conveniently, if you do that, and if you teach people and you engage people and it's good, people read it, people share it, and Google rewards you. So over time, you'll get more and more Google search traffic from this good content that you put out. And that definitely happened with me. And the other thing that really kicked off a lot of my early traffic was getting on other sites that were curated by people, a lot of people here at FinCon. So like Rockstar Finance was a big one for me early on. So I would write an article, you could submit it to Rockstar Finance, and then they would share it, and then other people would find out about it and who would go to my site. There are other bloggers in our audience, in our group here at FinCon, who curate articles as well. How many in here have like at least a regular post that curates other people's articles and shares it? No, Leaf does. I'm thinking of Leaf. A couple here. But there are sites out there that you can reach out to and let them know about an article you wrote. And so here was the big picture from that first FinCon 2015 to 2019 where we are today. And I'm going to zoom in on where the red arrows are right there. But pretty much, FinCon in September, as soon as you get past FinCon, big spike, and then it kind of goes a little bit higher. Another FinCon, big spike, goes a little higher, and then another. And so it just kept going up. So it's very interesting seeing kind of how that happened. So let's break down 2015 specifically. So in September of 2015, went to FinCon, had a great time, did what you're doing. I learned, took notes, met a lot of people. And I was on another BP podcast, Bigger Pockets podcast that same month. So it was my second Bigger Pockets podcast, and they happened to be at FinCon, and we did a live recording of their podcast there. So that was helpful. But the other thing that started happening, I started doing guest posts. So I went to a post with a friend of mine, Chris, that he had his blog, Eat the Financial Elephant. So he and I exchanged. He posted on my site, I posted on his site, but I also had a Rockstar feature. So if you look, let's see if I can get the laser pointer working. Nope, that's not working. All right, anyway, right there where the second arrow is, that's where the Rockstar feature happened. That's where the traffic really took a spike. The next one was because of that Rockstar feature, a lot more people saw it, and there happened to be a writer for the Toronto, the Globe and Mail in Canada. I'm in South Carolina. The Globe and Mail picked up one of my articles and just mentioned it in his little clip of one of his weekly posts, and I had that dramatic spike in December with like 20,000 people visiting my site from that one article mentioned. I also did a guest post on another site, 1,500 days, and interestingly, because other sites I'm posting on, my Google search, so the amount of articles that get searched on by people just typing something in the Google search went up by 6 times in December from the prior month. So pretty simple. Write some guest posts, get featured on some curated sites, and that's, for me, is how the growth started. And again, as I'm getting traffic, I have the opt-in on my front page, and so typically the traffic and the email growth correlate. I typically get about a 1 or 2% subscription rate. So if 100 people visit my site, 1 or 2 people are going to sign up for my email list. Does anybody know their opt-in rate? Anybody else keep track of that? Yeah? What's yours?
It's about 5% to confirmed.
5%. So I need to learn what he's doing. Anybody else keep track of that? 3%? Okay. So I've got room to grow. But the point is, you can get traffic, you convert some of them to email subscribers. All right, so let's look at 2016 to 17. So a lot of the same approach, same strategy. My goals from year to year were to create a certain number of articles, to write a certain number of articles, to write a certain number of guest posts, and to get on a certain number of podcasts as a guest on their podcast. So one of the big ones for me after the next FinCon was getting on the Mad Scientist podcast. So I met Brandon here at FinCon. We had a good time. We talked to each other, and we agreed that I would write a guest post for him. So I wrote a guest post, and we also did a podcast appearance on his podcast. And it just happened that my audience was very aligned with his audience, and so a lot of his people came over to my site, and you can see the big traffic spike right there. From the Mad Scientist appearance, I also had a Business Insider writer who picked up my story and wrote about it. And so that generated a lot of traffic. Had another Rockstar Finance appearance, and then I was on the Choose FI podcast. So like all in one month, kind of post FinCon, a lot of good things started happening. The rest of 2017 were similar, not as big of a spike as that, but I wrote guest posts. I started doing more Pinterest traffic, which kind of was hit or miss for me, and a lot more Google search. So that's what happened after that time. Yeah, any questions?
Looking at January 2017, if all that is happening at the same time, how do you know which one is really contributing?
So the question is, how do I know which one's contributing if all those things, right?
And if so, if you don't know, does it really matter? You're doing all the right things, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you can track it. So I tracked it through Google Analytics. And so you can look at who refers you to your site. So that's one of the important things to set up early on in your site is to plug in Google Analytics. And it's pretty straightforward with a WordPress site. Or if you can't do it, pay somebody $50 to do it, and to knock it out. And when you start doing that, though, every time somebody links to your site and they click on it, Google Analytics can break that down and say, okay, this many came from this site, this many came from this site. And then you can take it one step further, and you can set up what's called a goal in Google Analytics. And this is what I did and how I knew a lot of this. You can figure out that if they they subscribe to my email list, I have a thank you page after they do that. And so you can use Google Analytics to say how many people went to that thank you page and where did they come from. And so I did that. And it's had some basic numbers on traffic and where it came from, and also how many people opted in. Yep. Any other questions on this? All right, so 2018-19, May of 2018, I wanted to point out that Google search was about 30% of my total traffic. So if everybody visited my site, 100 people, about 30 of them were coming from searching from some search term that then Google recommended they come visit my site. In August of 2018, I launched a book. So I wrote a book, Bigger Pockets published it for me. I did a really big podcast tour, so I got on a lot of different podcasts, was on some YouTube channels, did some guest posting for other people. So just a lot of activity related to the book, but then also people are buying the book and reading that. And so August, September, you can see a big spike, and a lot of that was related to the book. But what I found interesting is after all that, having what's called domain authority on your site is a really important factor in getting ranked on search. So just the activity I did and having a book and being on podcasts and having a lot of people linking to me just from the podcast appearances, I went from 30% of my total traffic from Google to 50% just in a relatively short period of time. And so that when you think about what's the purpose of a book, what's the purpose, you make some money from a book, hopefully, but it's much more, for me at least, it was a lead generation, it was an awareness, people getting to know me, getting to read my book and liking my content in a condensed form, but also having the authority and just the promotion of that book, helping your website, and that's where the after effects really stick around even after you write the book. All right, so here are some of the takeaways things that I did that I think led to some of that growth during that time. So number one was having improved email capture. So somebody asked earlier, I was using MailChimp to start off, and it was fine. MailChimp was good because I had one opt-in on my front page, and I had another landing page where if somebody wanted to sign up for my newsletter, they went there. So it was like two places where they would sign up. It wasn't a big deal, and it was just one opt-in. But one thing I started doing was realizing that I'm getting these pages where Google's sending a lot of traffic to on very specific topics. For example, I wrote an article on house hacking, and it started getting up closer to number one and eventually to number one on Google. And so instead of just giving this general, get my toolkit, what if I provided a specific opt-in that said, if you want a house hack, here's a checklist on the first 5 things you need to do whenever you get your first house hack. That's going to be much more interesting to that person on that article. And so I call that or a lot of people call it a content upgrade. And it's just a very specific giveaway that you put on that one page. And so I started doing that first with my top 5 articles, and then eventually with some of my other articles. And by doing that, you increase the conversion rate on those pages. And you get more people to start opting into your email list. And so I went to ConvertKit because that whole process of doing that and delivering that freebie was much easier and was just set up for that kind of thing. And so I made that switch, and I just started working on first those top 5 articles and then eventually doing as many as I could. So that was really important. The other thing I did was make a free course. So eventually now I have a paid course as well, but having a free course was just a different form of opt-in. Instead of the toolkit, instead of a PDF, I had a course that they went through and got over 7 days on email, and it was just a different opt-in. It was just something else that people were interested in, they opted in, and so that also just increased my conversion rate when people visited my site. So just to give you kind of the big picture, there's different ways to measure impact. I really didn't make any money. I made money the first 2009 to 2015, pre-kind of blog, pre-FinCon. A lot of the money I was making was just one-on-one consulting, doing group masterminds. And so I made some money. It was kind of a part-time thing. My main thing was real estate investing. I started doing the blog, and I stopped doing a lot of coaching, just focused on content, delivering, building my email list. And it was almost nothing, a couple $1,000 a year kind of thing for 2016 and 17. And then I realized that I'm paying out a lot of money to ConvertKit and some of these other places, and I actually need to make a business out of this hobby. And so I decided instead of ads, instead of other forms of monetization, I created an online course. So I like teaching. I'm a teacher. And so a course just was a natural kind of extension of my content. And so I started doing that in 2018 and 19. And it's going pretty well. The courses, I did a beta test in 2017. Last year I launched it twice. This year I'm going to launch it, my second launch in the fall of this year. And that's the main form of monetization for me. And it's become a real business, primarily because of the email list. Because when you have a group of people who are opening your emails, who are interested in your content, when you have a product and you ask them to buy it, a certain percentage of them are interested. Not everybody, but a certain percentage are interested. And so it gave me a built-in connection, a communication channel with my audience because I had that email already set up and in place. And so it's allowed me to start monetizing it more. One of my big interests, I mentioned Do What Matters is kind of the theme of my site. I was actually motivated by a friend of mine, Physician on Fire, Leaf. He donates half of his profits from his website to charity every year. And so I was kind of ambivalent about making money with the blog. I was writing about financial independence, making my money with real estate investing. This was kind of a hobby. But I became more interested because I want to grow this business and sell the course and make more money and then give away half of it. So that's part of my kind of mission and what makes it fun for me to start selling. All right, so my challenge for you, hopefully there's some takeaways you got from my talk, but challenge number one is start focusing and prioritizing building your email list. Make that a focus. It seems like a simple thing, maybe even seems like a little old-fashioned these days with all the different social media, but I think making that your top priority to build your email list is a very important part of your online business. And then figure out, what is it that matters to you with your business? Are you trying to grow money so you can leave another job? Are you trying to make an impact? Are you trying to change people's lives? There's all sorts of reasons we're here in creating content, and an email list is a really important tool to help you do that.